In the recent Major League Fishing event on Lake Chickamauga, Justin Lucas dominated the qualifying rounds by catching bass on offshore ledges primarily without using forward-facing sonar. In this video, I'm going to show you the full process for locating and catching offshore bass in the early summer using traditional electronics. Let's get into it.
What's up, y'all? Today I'm out here trying to find some post-spawn offshore bass with my electronics. We're on a power plant lake today, so water temperatures are going to be a little bit warmer and these fish should be a little bit further ahead than other lakes in the area, but it's only 65-degree water temp, so I'd say these fish are maybe a week or two, maybe 3 weeks ahead of where I would expect other fisheries to be. And actually, by the time I post this video, it should be right on time for you guys to follow these same steps, hopefully find some of these offshore kind of early summer post-spawn type fish. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pull up our mapping here, and I'm going to start on a ledge where I actually found some pre-spawn fish, and I had those marked, and I caught them in a video earlier this year. There's also some really nice points that potentially could have some fish. You can see there's a really nice creek channel that runs right here, and then a point that drops off sharp, and then another drop off or ledge right here. One thing about this lake right now, like all the lakes in my area, is that the water is really high. We had a lot of rain over the past 2-3 weeks, and so this lake is probably 4 or 5 feet above its normal pool, maybe even more than that. So there probably are some fish still up cruising the banks, but whenever these lakes get up higher than this, than their normal pool, a lot of guys are gonna be on the bank and they're gonna ignore these offshore fish. And I find that I can catch a lot of really good offshore fish actually in these high water conditions because they're just not being touched by other anglers. One thing we see here is we already see some bait on our downscan view in that 15 to 20 foot of water range, which is a really good indicator that that might be the depth we need to be looking for these fish in. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna graph this point. You can see I'm coming up against this pretty sharp drop off, and I'm not seeing any fish on down scan or anything right now, but we're going to be graphing around here and trying to basically first find the depth of those bait fish and then try to find some groups of fish that are setting up on this offshore structure. One thing I'll say about catching fish in the post-spawn offshore is that one, they're going to set up deeper than you expect, and two, usually you're going to not find potentially the biggest groups in the lake quite yet, but as it gets more towards that summertime, that's when you get those really, really big schools. So we may still have fish kind of trickling out here, maybe finding groups of 10 to 15 fish, but if they're further along, again, we may still find groups of 30, 40, 50 fish. It kind of just depends. But as these fish trickle out, the schools are going to get bigger and bigger. Obviously, those fish are coming from the bank offshore, and so the more they come offshore, the bigger the schools are going to be. And with this water being high, I expect that some of those fish might be kind of held up on the bank more so than normal, so there may not be as many out here, but it's kind of hard to tell when these fish spawned exactly. I haven't been out here in 3 or 4 months, so let's kind of just keep graphing. I want to stick in that like 15-ish foot of water zone. I also want to take a look at some of these brush piles and different things. Maybe there's some fish setting up in brush, though I kind of want to focus more on the actual ledges themselves. And we actually can see a couple of fish suspended out in front of that brush pile there in that 20-foot zone, which is kind of interesting. I want to see if there's any fish on this spot where they were setting up in the pre-spawn. This is where a bunch of fish were setting up on this ledge, and it looks like there isn't too much going on right off the bat here, but that's not always the case. Sometimes there's some fish that set up out here. Let me just take a look. We're just graphing over this for the first time, so we may have to make a few passes to kind of see. It looks like there was 1 or 2 fish kind of setting up on this deal. We can see one fish right here. That's one bass right there. Nothing crazy, but at least we have a fish. So let me mark that actually just to kind of have that as a point of reference. Oh, that doesn't really help because I have those other fish icons there. So as you can see, there's not nearly as many fish as there were here in the pre-spawn, and the fish were stacked here. I'll show a screen recording of what the fish looked like from my last time I was here. That was like in February, but it looks like there aren't as many fish on this right now. So these fish, again, will be kind of trickling out. And so we're gonna have to maybe look at some more kind of intermediate offshore areas. I would consider this a summer ledge. This is where a lot of fish set up in the summertime, and I'm not seeing a ton of activity. I see a few fish potentially now popping on the side scan, but they're definitely scattered. So there's a couple of fish setting up like maybe right here if we zoom in, 1, 2 fish, but definitely not a school. And that's really what I want to find right now, is finding a school of fish. Let's switch over to this view real quick just to see. There are some bait fish here. You can see they're in that 20-foot range, and this ledge is out here in like 25 feet. So we may be a little bit deep potentially on this ledge as well, based on where these fish want to be setting up. Now, I do want to graph down closer towards this corner here to see if maybe there's a shallower stretch on this drop. But if we don't find anything here, that's not a big deal. It's just our first spot of the day. We're going to just keep graphing and looking around. But ideally, what I want to find is a group of anywhere from, let's say, 15 to 20 bass. If I can find that, I'll feel confident that I can actually stop and fish. But I'm not going to stop on just 1 or 2 fish here and there, because in this post-spawn time of the year, while there aren't that many groups, when you do find a group, they're usually very aggressive and you're going to be able to load the boat quickly. Now, if we switch back over here, I am seeing a lot of kind of suspended stuff, just suspended shad and some random fish setting up. We did see a fish around a brush pile earlier too, so that was an interesting thing. Maybe we need to be fishing brush more so than the ledges, but I feel pretty confident we're going to find something today on this deal. There's got to be at least a few fish setting up offshore out here with water temperatures, again, being warmer on this lake. And we might just be, again, a tiny bit early, but I like to be a little bit early because sometimes you find the mother lode. So let's run to another spot real quick. I'm just going to pull up over here, this mapping, and we'll run around and try to find a few spots. Okay, so here's another spot that I found some brush piles on earlier this year that had a few fish on it, so we'll check this out. And as I make my way up here, I want to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of all the Fish Moment long-form content, and that's Bridgeford Foods. Bridgeford's been a long-time sponsor of the Fish Moment YouTube channel and sports a lot of professional anglers as well. They're a great sponsor of the sport of fishing, and so if you love bass fishing and want to support a company that promotes a sport you love, pick up some Bridgeford beef jerky at your local dollar stores, gas stations, and Walmart checkout aisles. Good deal. Appreciate Bridgeford for that. So let's kind of look through here. So boom, right off the bat, actually, we have a really nice brush pile with another fish suspended up over the top of it. We may need to just fish some of these piles. Look at that right there. There's actually a couple of fish. They don't look super big, so we can't really see them on the 2D sonar. We can see the dots right here, right there on our down scan, but we don't see anything on 2D. And I've talked about this for years. I have my settings set on my 2D sonar where I actually can filter out the smaller fish. So those are probably smaller little, 1 pounders, 1.5 pounders, nothing crazy. We want to see nice arches combined with those dots. So arches on the 2D, dots on the down scan. That'll let us know that we're going to be looking at better quality fish. But we're going to keep graphing here. This is just a really nice point that sticks out here out into the lake. It's just kind of just a main lake point. Nothing super crazy. There's a few fish kind of suspended around out here. There's a potential that we could catch fish if we were using forward facing today, just kind of picking off some of these random floaters. But I don't have forward facing on the boat today, so we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to focus on the fish that are catchable on the bottom or related to structure. There are some fish you can see kind of floating through here. There's a little bit of bait. Definitely potential in this area if, again, we were going to use forward facing, but I'm not going to mess with it right now. It doesn't really seem like the fish are locked down the bottom or anything crazy. There are a few fish here and there. Nothing really to write home about, but I do like the amount of shad that's here. So a lot of shad. So there's got to be some fish offshore here. As much shad as there are out here offshore, there's got to be at least a few fish setting up. That's at least my guess. And the fact there's so much shad on this point makes me just feel like there's got to be some fish somewhere here. I'm not seeing anything jumping off the screen quite yet. And you're going to have to graph a little bit more this time of year, guys, than you would expect. Even though these fish are pulling offshore, they're not going to be pulling up on every single spot. So I would say that as you get into like the more summertime season, so June, July, you may only have to graph for 20, 30 minutes, check some of the few key spots that are here, and you're able to find a group of fish. When you're graphing in April into May, this earlier time of the year, it's going to be a little bit more time consuming to graph these spots, because I would say maybe only 2 or 3 spots on a 5-mile stretch of the lake, you're going to have a good group of fish on them. But again, when you find them, it's definitely worth it. Hopefully we'll show you that here. This is more of a patience game, more so a lot of times than a, just getting into the spot immediately and starting catching them, but I find that is what's rewarding for me. It's the search, the hunt, feeling like I'm finding something that other anglers aren't fishing. That's why I'm always out here doing this. I kind of want to find that untapped potential and put them in the boat in a way that other guys aren't doing. That's what's fun for me. But we got a really nice drop off right here. Looks like there might be actually a couple fish on that too. We'll pull up our 2D. That's a nice sharp drop right in that depth zone that we were looking at. And there's actually a few fish potentially right up in here too. I'm going to keep graphing this for a second because I can see a lot of activity. I want to switch over to my 2D here, but I want to finish graphing this out because there's a lot of stuff happening right in here. This looks pretty good. Okay, so let's see here. Some fish, there might be like a fish right here. There's some smaller fish right here, but those arches are pretty small. Really nice bait activity, but the arches are small, so it looks like we're not dealing with the biggest fish in the lake. Again, we're not gonna start fishing on this stuff until we really get a feeling that there's some better quality fish. A lot of these waypoints I have here, guys, are from earlier this year, so they're kind of just too deep. The lake was a lot lower then, probably 10 foot lower than it is now. It's been coming up consistently through the spring, so I don't think that those fish are going to be out on those other waypoints, but I'm just going to keep graphing this. I'm looking at side scan, seeing if we can see a few fish just kind of scattered, not seeing anything that really, again, jumps off the screen on me in terms of fish on side scans. So we've kind of checked some more of these. I would consider these more of like a summertime main lake type stuff, and these are spots I've caught them on in June and July out here. So let's kind of change it up and head to an area that maybe has a little bit closer access to the back of a creek. I just want to graph over this little rise right here. It's right in that depth zone we kind of want, but again, no fish out here. So they're not quite here yet. So now that we've kind of checked some of these more main lake areas on this sort of deal, this is again more main lake structure. I want to head further in here, further back. I do want to check, there's a really nice rounded point here, and with this lake being up, I'm thinking they might be pulling some current. So I want to check this point. This is a point where I caught some fish in the pre-spawn again. And if we don't find anything on this point here, then that gives me a really good indication they haven't made it that far yet, and we can start making our way further back into some of these creeks and guts and stuff like that. So let's make a quick run, check one more kind of main lake-ish spot, and then we will head back into a creek. Okay, so really quick, I'm actually gonna check out this main lake point right here. It sticks out here. It's harder to see on the map, but there's a really nice channel that it drops off into, and I'm gonna check, there's a lot of bait here. I'm gonna check in that same depth zone we've been kind of looking in that like 15-ish foot zone. Looks like there's quite a bit of fish activity actually on this point. There's a lot of suspended fish, and you can see a lot of these balls of bait. There's a lot of fish kind of just spread out in through here that are chasing on the bait, which is actually an interesting sign. None of them look super big, but I want to graph through there a few times because if there's enough fish there, I might be able to catch some on a flutter spoon or something that targets those suspended fish a little bit, even without the forward facing, because it looks like they might be setting up on this point and related to the point more so than just randomly on the bait. And if that's the case, these are definitely catchable fish. So we're going to take a look at this, regraph this. I mean, there's a ton of bait here. The one thing I'd be concerned about is honestly with the amount of bait here, it's hard to differentiate my bait from the shad. And I also want to see if these fish are actually sticking around this point again or if they're kind of just randomly swimming around. I'm seeing a lot of bait. I'm not seeing a ton of fish. There's a few fish here and there. If we, again, had forward-facing sonar, I think these are the fish, if you guys do have it, that you could target. You could target like this fish in this bait ball right here. Definitely a catchable fish right there. Bait, fish in the bait ball, throw a Demiki rig, and you're definitely getting on some. But we're ignoring that for now because we don't have the tool. So we're going to keep on graphing. I'm going to call that out though in videos, guys. For those who do have forward-facing sonar, I'm not going to use forward-facing in my videos that much really anymore, but I do want to call it out for those who have it and show you, hey, these are fish that might be catchable that you can graph with traditional electronics. You could pull up there, fish those spots, and probably catch a few fish. But we're going to keep going more on that traditional path. I do want to graph out here a little bit more in the center of this creek as we make our way across, just to see if there's any activity here. I also am a little bit concerned about running because there's debris and everything everywhere. So I'm just gonna idle the rest of this just to be safe. I don't want to hit a big log or anything like that. I can already see some logs sticking around. There's even some birds and stuff that are standing on logs, so that's a little bit sketch, but no worries there. We're gonna graph a little bit more. And this is actually right here where I was catching a lot of fish in the winter time. There were a bunch of fish basically sitting out here in the middle of this channel intersection. I was catching them using forward facing, and this is that wintering area. And I'm sure some of these fish pulled up to some of these banks and pockets and stuff, and they eventually end up spawning, and they're gonna make their way back out to these kind of main channel intersections later in the year where you see all these waypoints and stuff. This is kind of, again, more summerish time stuff. And with the lake being up and with everything going on, it looks like, you know, these fish are not really in these spots. So we're gonna probably have to head back into a creek, but I like to keep them honest because sometimes you'll be surprised. You'll find a group that's set up on a main lake ledge really early in the year. I've found this happening even on like a Grand Lake and a Table Rock and Beaver Lake. You'll find these massive groups first week of May on these offshore areas, and you wouldn't expect it. The lake is high. You're like, man, these fish should be in the bushes, but for whatever reason, a lot of times these fish will just set up offshore really early, especially if they spawn early. And even on Beaver Lake, I was catching some post-spawn fish the last week of March. So I expect first week of May, there's gonna be at least a few offshore schools out here on Beaver as well that will try to fish. There's so much high water on Beaver right now that it's kind of hard to even drive the boat around out there. That's why I'm not out there today trying to fish. But let's head around so you can see this lake is a lot higher than it was, because a lot of the waypoints I made earlier were in like 25 feet of water. These waypoints here, now they're in like 30. So we're gonna have to make our way a little bit further up on this point, see if there's any activity. It's just another point with a channel next to it. Nothing crazy. It's just a decent spot. And ooh, there we go. Maybe just found some fish. I found them on some side scan fish. We can look right here, right in here. I'll zoom in. 1, 2, 3, 4 fish setting up right on that transition from harder bottom to softer bottom. 100% fish right there. Let's zoom this back out. Definitely some fish right there. I like this little harder bottom patch. This is the type of stuff I find a lot of fish setting up on. So it's kind of an in-between. It's not really like a deep offshore spot. It's not really a ledge or anything. It's just a rounded off point, and it looks like there's a bunch of fish stacked up right here. Yeah, we can see them right here. Wow, there we go. So those are those fish right there. We can see some nice arches right here. 1, 2, 3. We can see those nice dots. I mean, that is 100% fish right there. This is the size arch we're really looking for. So you can see that arch right there. It's a big blob. We can see that isolated dot there on our view. Let me get this back. Oh my goodness, this is all screwed up. There we go. Let's graph back around on that one more time. We know there's fish there. That is exactly what we're looking for. And again, it's more on like I would say like the ledge and everything is more like out here and out kind of in this area. So these fish are more towards this pocket where they would spawn, and they're moving out of this pocket and they're setting up on this first little hard spot just off the bank in that 15-20 foot of water. Exactly what we were looking for. And this is the type of stuff that I'm always excited to try to find fish on. I just want to see if there's more fish spread out on the side of this, because we're not using forward facing, so I don't want to get locked in on just a couple of waypoints. If these fish are spread out further across this point, I want to kind of see in general where these fish might be. Looks like we have a few more fish that actually are just kind of scattered out. There's a fish right here. You can kind of barely see it. There's a few more dots even on that side scan. So I'm going to mark right here with a fish icon as well. Just to take a look. There's some bait up here in this like 10 foot of water zone. I mean, this looks awesome. These fish are not super deep either, which is nice. And these look like these might be some crankbait fish, which is what I am excited to catch some fish doing today, hopefully. I love cranking. So the wind is blowing. It's not really blowing at all. I think I can probably catch them from this angle. So I'm gonna stop the boat right here. We're gonna pull up our mapping, get lined up. We have our range ring set to 150 feet, so we're not too close to these fish. We're gonna line up with our waypoints, and we're gonna bomb out there. I'm gonna zoom this into 100 feet and drop the trolling motor, and let's see if we can catch some of these fish. Okay, so we got pulled up here to the spot, firing my first cast up there, and I'm gonna try to stay a little bit further off these fish. You can see I'm basically 100 feet away with my range ring on those fish, and I'm gonna try to bomb a bait up there, make a long cast so I don't get too close to these fish and disrupt them off the bat. The water is actually pretty stained up here. It is dirtier than I've seen it in a long time, which makes sense why these fish are setting up in that 20 foot or less rather than deeper with that water visibility. There's a lot of debris and stuff in the water as well, but I'm hoping that we're gonna be able to get a couple of these fish to bite off this spot, because there was a few good ones down there. Not a ton of fish, just a group of maybe 10 to 15 fish, and that's what we were expecting to find. I'm just gonna start with a bait that I can kind of just work through this zone kind of quickly, see if these fish want something that drops in front of their face. This is a core tackle shimmy rig with a Hog Farmer spunk shad on the back, and I'm just going to make 1 or 2 casts with this just to see if anyone is home and wants to bite this bait that's a little bit more subtle going through their area. Here's that bait right there. Sweet little rig, shimmies on the fall. And in the post spawn, a lot of times I find that it's like a 1 or 2 bait sort of thing, and most of the time it's going to be a crankbait for me or some type of worm. That's like 90% of the time what I'm going to get these fish to bite on. And I don't know exactly what the fish are going to be doing in terms of how aggressive they're going to be, if they're going to be less aggressive or more aggressive. We're kind of past that morning bite time. We're in that like kind of afternoon period, so kind of missed the morning bite, which is not that big of a deal, but we're going to try to throw at these fish, see if we can get a bite on this, and then pick up the crankbait afterwards, move a little bit closer probably, just because we got to get that crankbait past those fish and then reel it down to depth. But just wanted to see if they'd eat this first. This is the easiest way to catch them. But I was expecting it probably to be a crankbait bite, most likely. And we're not going to make too many casts on these fish. We're in a ton of fish down there, so I'm going to make like 6, 7, 8 casts on these fish, and if we don't get any bites, we're going to move on to the next spot right away. And a lot of times offshore this time of year, it's a timing deal too, so we will maybe pull up and fish these fish again a little bit later. Just got a Blitz Magnum EXDR deep diving crankbait. Bomb that thing out there, burn it back over this hard spot. 20-foot diving crankbait, so I should be able to get down to those fish no problem. See if we can get one of them to react. Didn't really hit the bottom great on that cast. May need to reposition my boat as well to work this bait uphill, just because those fish were sitting on that slope more so than on the flat spot. And so what we might have to do from a boat position standpoint, ooh, thought that was a fish, hit the next piece of brush. I'm gonna work my boat around here and just try to work this bait so that I'm bringing it up this slope of this point rather than down the slope, because when you're bringing it down the slope, you're basically bringing it over the top of their heads and it's not digging into the bottom, it's just kind of swimming through the middle of the water column. So instead, a lot of times it's better to turn your boat, working it up the hill or up the slope. So we're gonna fire it there, make like 2 or 3 more casts with this crankbait, then maybe throw a worm up there at them, potentially. I need to get my crankbait muscles back. My arms are cramping already, just winding this crankbait in. It's grinding in there pretty good though. Let's see here. Okay, so now we're a little bit more positioned uphill on these fish. See, get lined back up on our waypoint. We're out this way now. Okay, so we're kind of lined back up on those fish. They're right on that little rocky spot. I can dig in the bottom a lot better now. And I brought it right through that area. No takers. one more cast down there. Just see if we can get anyone's interest. And then we'll keep rolling. We'll keep the spot in mind because there's definitely some fish here. They're not that many. There's a few though. And a lot of times you have to get these schools kind of fired up, figure out the right bait or approach. So obviously we're starting with the crankbait here and a moving bait. And that might just not be what they want. So I'm gonna throw a worm down there for one cast just to see if maybe they want the worm. Let's get this down. Okay, so we're getting a little bit close on these fish, but that's not that too big of a deal. Throw the worm out there. We're kind of up on top at this point now, and we're working that bait up the hill is the idea. So I just have a core tackle weedless wacky shot now, throwing that thing down there, letting it sink all the way to the bottom. We're just gonna work it up the slope, see if there's a few fish that might be biting, and if not a big deal, we're gonna run to the next spot. Now, I like to spend about 10 minutes per spot. I've been here for about 10 minutes. That's about as long as I spend on any of these spots. And we're just gonna see if any of these fish are interested in biting. This worm is slowly working down there. It's finally down to the bottom. Took a while. It's hard to fish for 10 minutes when you throw a worm like this because it takes so long for it to fall back down to the bottom that you gotta slow down so much. That's why I like to fish a bait like a crankbait or a moving bait or something I can cover water with a little bit faster than a worm. But in this post-spawn, summerish time, when there's not a lot of activity going on, you kind of just sometimes have to slow down to a little shaky head, a worm, a Nico rig, stuff like that. So work that thing up there. And I like to show you guys when I don't catch them too, because I don't pull up on every single spot and catch them first cast. It's just not how that works. Sometimes these groups are just not as good as what I think they are, or you can see a few fish there, but they're just not super on it, super aggressive, and that's perfectly fine. That's normal. So let's move to the next spot real quick. I kind of worked that worm up that slope, threw a crankbait at them, didn't want to bite. Normally when you find a good group out here that hasn't been messed with, they should bite almost first cast. So let's keep rolling. Okay, back on the graph here. So I'm gonna make my way back into one of these creeks to see if we can find a bigger group of fish. I'm just gonna idle all this just because, again, there's a lot of debris in the water. And it's actually pretty nice right now because we have some warmer weather. I can actually take my coat off. It's been so windy and cold over the past few weeks, even though we had really warm weather like in March, but the wind was blowing like 50 miles an hour gusts, so it was hard to get out in the lake. And then it started getting cold again. It's kind of a weird spring. Water temperatures were up in the 60s and they dropped back to the 50s on like Beaver Lake and stuff, and now they're kind of back in the 60s. So I don't know, it's been kind of a weird year, but either way, let's keep rolling through here. I want to graph this. This is just another main lake kind of summertime point that drops off here, and I want to see if there's any fish here. But I have basically, I feel like I can basically rule out this type of spot from what I've seen already. I think we need to make our way back into one of these creeks. I think we're going to find a wad of them set up on a drop or a little channel swing back in here. Feel pretty good about that. Is that a fish right there? Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. It's hard to tell because my 2D wasn't showing there. That's fine. Let's keep rolling. I think there's going to be a fish or two. There's some really nice creek channel swings that swing through this creek. The mapping on this lake isn't the best, but there's some channels and things that wind through in that like 15 to 20 foot range, and I think that there could be some fish setting up on some of the standing timber and the drop-offs and stuff. We should be able to find some fish. So let's roll back in here a little bit further. I do want to kind of see if there's any fish just suspended out here, because that would give us an idea of if the fish are more out, you know, roaming around, or if they would actually be grouped up. We found that one school of like, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 7 fish, so not a ton of them. I still feel like if I get back over there at some point today and throw like the right bait, maybe I need to throw a big spoon, or I need to figure out something with those fish. I think I can probably get some of those fish to bite, but I'm not gonna sit there and grind on them for 45 minutes to start the day. I'll kind of add it to the rotation, pull up there, make a few casts every maybe hour or two to see if I can get any of those fish to bite if they're still there. But let's keep rolling through here. There's a waypoint here. Again, another spot where I caught some fish in the winter, just on this channel drop. But I have a feeling that these fish are not going to be this far out. They're going to be more maybe back up in here. This is another spot where I caught them. I fished out here quite a bit, I feel like, this winter for some reason. I just was out here fishing a lot, but I don't know if any of these waypoints are going to be any good. I highly doubt it. There are a few fish sitting up on the bottom down here. Kind of interesting. I don't know what they are. They're probably catfish right in through here. There's also some random fish just suspended out here on bait. Again, not catchable for me without forward facing, so we're not going to mess with them. But we are getting into one of these channel swings now. And it's in a good depth, actually. It's 20 foot of water range. I'm thinking there might be, I mean, there's a bunch of fish suspended out here, a lot of them now over this. So this actually is a good sign that we see all these fish suspended up, because if we can mark some of this timber, we might actually be able to catch some of these fish that are suspended in this timber. There's a fish like right there in that timber. I'm gonna mark these with a fish icon. I'll mark it with a tree too. Let me mark it with a tree. That might be a better call. So I don't just think it's random fish. There's a bunch of timber through here, but there's a lot of random fish that were suspended. There was some fish right in here that were just suspended up. Not big ones, but they're just suspended. And there's a lot of trees through here, and I'm wondering if we found the right little patch of trees, could I throw a swim bait or something else through these trees? Because it's actually a hard piece of cover that those fish are related to, in addition to obviously all the bait that's in this area as well. So that's kind of cool. I don't know which trees are going to be better than other trees, but we're just going to have to graph through here and just kind of see. I'm going to keep this view up. The mapping is kind of useless back up in here, to be honest, so we're just going to keep these 3 views up, see if we can side scan any trees, see if we can find any fish on the 2D or down scan mixed in as well. Not really seeing anything that jumps off the screen right now. These trees are kind of randomly scattered throughout here. So we'll work our way through. There are a bunch of random fish just scattered throughout here. Nothing great, but just a bunch of random fish. A few more trees. I feel like this is going to be, there's going to be something. There's more trees up over here too. I feel like we're going to find some fish in these trees. If we could find, even if we could find like a stretch of like 5, 6, 7 trees in a row that have fish in them, those are definitely catchable fish. We can work with that. We just have to figure out which trees they're in. They're in this, like, a lot of this activities in that 10-ish foot range, which is really good. It's a good depth to target these fish too, with the swim bait and stuff like that. Let's work our way through here, see if there's anything back up in this creek. So you got a little bit of brush, a lot of bait. Not seeing a ton of fish around any of this stuff, but there's a really nice point coming up here. I'll switch back over this real quick. There's a really nice point coming up that drops into this channel, and this is kind of like, I would expect to be one of the first places these fish would set up offshore if they're going to set up out here. So I could see this being really good. We just have to figure out which stretch they're on. There's some nice tree action there. Maybe a fish setting up in that, just a lot of bait. Hard to tell. We're going to zigzag through here. We have these fish icons where fish were in the pre-spawn, and they could be setting up. A lot of times when these fish set up in one spot in the pre-spawn, they'll pull right back out there in the post-spawn. So pretty good chance we might find some fish right around the waypoints we made earlier this year. Another nice tree. Trying to see if we can see any fish in these trees. We might be able to see a fish potentially in that tree. I'm gonna keep rolling, nothing crazy. I wanna find a lot of them though. I got a feeling we're gonna find like one tree or one stretch that has like 15 fish in it. I'm just shocked that we haven't found that yet. Don't know how far back into this thing we have to go to potentially find that. Okay, that tree had a few fish on it right there. I'm gonna mark this as the tree so we can see a fish right here, right here. There's actually a few fish on that tree right there. Switch back real quick. Looks like there's more fish. We're kind of getting into a little zone here that looks like there's a few more fish popping on that down scan view right in through here too. There's a few fish right there. They're right on these waypoints we made earlier this year, which is interesting. Kind of in the same zone. I wonder if they're up on top of this little drop. There might be some fish scattered up on top of this deal. We're gonna have to kind of re-look at that here in a second. Let's look through some of these trees real quick. There's a lot going on the screen, so it's hard. I can't parse out everything right off the bat, but it looks like there are some fish setting up here. A lot of shallow bushes and shallow cover and stuff up in the water. So I think a lot of guys would get sucked to that shallow vegetation and shallow cover. Ooh, this gets real shallow. Uh-oh. Might be getting a little bit too shallow. No, we're good. Okay, we're good. I want to work here because this real shallow stuff, we're not gonna be able to fish this right off the bat. But a lot of this really shallow stuff here in this like super shallow water, this is, ooh, there's some fish actually on that right there. This is the type of stuff I love graphing, guys. There are some fish sitting up on this point right here. Dirt shallow. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'll show you here in a second. I want to keep graphing this for a minute, but it looks like we found something here. They're really shallow up on that point. My goodness. There's another little drop. There's more fish right there. There's a bunch of them right there. Oh my goodness. They're all down this drop. Okay, so we found something right here, guys. So when we take a look at the side scan, basically what we have going on here is this is a classic post-spawn situation where you have basically some fish that are setting up right on this break, super, super shallow. And there's fish, if I mark them out, I'll mark all of these right here. Hard to see, but that's a fish right there. You can see it's a little dot there. Come on, engine, hold up on me. We're gonna mark fish. We can see a bunch of fish right in here. There's a dot right there, dot right there, dot right there. So there's a bunch of fish right in here. Let's get back and see if we saw any more. There's an old like kind of road or road bed that came through here. Looks like there's some nice brush and stuff out here as well that could potentially have a fish or two on it off the end of this. But I really like this drop, like right in through here and then it drops off. That looks really good. There's actually a big dot right there too. There's another dot right here. Let me mark this as fish. Okay, so we have that ledge right there, which that looks freaking perfect. To drag a worm, throw something, you're gonna have to throw something pretty shallow on those fish. So we're not gonna be able to catch those fish with a deep diving crankbait by any means, but I have a few tricks up my sleeve to potentially get those fish to bite. But we can't fish those right off the bat, so I wanna make my way a little bit further back in this creek just to see if there's anything else, because we literally just graphed over the top of those. And I wanna see if there's anything near the back of this. There's another kind of end of this channel, and maybe there's something there. We'll let that rest for maybe 10 minutes to give it a rest. If anything, I'll just skip ahead and I might just grab a bite to eat and let that chill for a minute. Okay, so I'm making my way up to these waypoints here that we marked and basically just throwing a big 8-inch depth Sakamata shad over this shallow flat to see if I can pull up any fish that are more aggressive, and then after that I'm gonna switch to maybe a worm or something and fish a little bit slower just on this edge. But I like to start with a pretty aggressive bait to start, just to see if these fish are up here and they're wanting to eat. There's big gizzards in this lake, you know, 6, 8, 10-inch gizzard shad. So if I can pull a fish up with this big bait, my chances of catching a good one are pretty high. And we're just gonna focus on where we kind of saw those fish, where we marked those waypoints, and I'm gonna work down this drop, seeing if maybe there's a fish that might be up here aggressive. Again, we're kind of in that mid-morning lull, which is kind of a bummer. A lot of times there's a really good bite first hour of the morning, and then there's a lot better bite even later in the day. We kind of are in between both those good bites, but that's okay. We're just gonna work with what we're given here, and I'll make a few casts again with this more aggressive bait, then slow down with a worm to see if we can find anything that wants to bite. Try to find that right bait. It's a little bit of a grind this time of year. When I'm fishing offshore this time of year, I'm not expecting to get 30, 40 bites. Most of the time you're just going to get a handful, but they can be some really good ones. And then as you get further into the summer, again, that like late May, June, water temperatures are in the mid 70s, stuff like that. That's when you can really start catching a lot of fish and catch a lot of numbers. But until then, it's definitely more of a grind. You're just picking off these few fish that have pulled out, but a lot of times they're really, really big ones, and it's a lot of fun. So we're gonna put that big fluke down for a second and throw a worm. Just got a core tackle Ozark rig on a 10-inch big bite baits B2 worm. Fire that worm out there on these waypoints, just kind of work that thing through this area. It's gonna be a little bit of a grind right now, I feel like, but that's okay, because we got plenty of waypoints here to check. There were a bunch of fish kind of setting up around here. We're gonna make a few casts on each of these waypoint stretches, and then after we fish each of these little, oh golly, one just hammered it right there. Come on, fish. I was working it up and he smacked it. What in the world? Okay, that's a good sign. I was working that thing pretty aggressive too, hopping it, and then right when it hit the edge, that fish came up and cracked it right there. That's wild. Okay. Let's see if he comes back. Right on that waypoint, I mean, I cast directly on where that fish was marked, and that fish hit it. We just gotta keep fishing through this area. We may have found a bait that they like, or could just be a little guy, it's hard to tell, but we're gonna keep working down this stretch. There's these random pieces of timber, and I don't know exactly where they are. Again, if you have forward facing, you could see them, you could see the fish, and it'd be way easier, but I'm not here for easy. I'm here for a challenge. And we're gonna make several more casts up here to see if any of these waypoints have a lot of fish. I actually feel like the last waypoint in this stretch is going to be the best one. There was a hard spot down there. Fish just boiled right there though. There was a hard spot, we saw multiple fish on it. There's fish right here too though. A lot of times it's figuring out the bait, but a lot of times it's not even the bait. A lot of times it's literally just the timing where these fish just get aggressive at certain points in time. And it's a little bit tricky sometimes to figure out that timing. Let's keep working down this stretch. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick up one other bait here in a second to work down this stretch after we make this cast. See where those waypoints are. Okay, so they're down that, we're down this whole stretch here. I may have to pick up a crankbait, but a shallower diving crankbait potentially, just to kind of grind this drop to cover water. I do like throwing that fluke as well, but it's a little bit tricky because you can't feel the bottom as well as you can with the crankbait, where you can actually feel like where the drop is and the type of structure and everything that's down there. And I also feel like sometimes getting a reaction strike out of these fish can be good. Let me actually sit down. I'm gonna tie on a Magnum Squarebill. Give me a second. Okay, so I tied on a Magnum Squarebill here. This is a Strike King KVD 8.0. Gonna fire that thing out there, work our way down these waypoints, see if there's anything going on down here. Got a handful of dots still to fish. There's a bunch of grass on this deal, which is really annoying. It's floating, and there's also some, I guess, on the bottom here, which is making it a little bit trickier because there's not like a nice clean spot down here for these fish to set up on. I like it when you have a nice clean bottom or a hard bottom for these fish to relate to this time of year. Oh, golly, yeah, hit right at the boat. There we go, guys. That's what I was talking about. Nice fish right here, Magnum Squarebill. He hit that thing right at the boat. Nice fish. So I'm talking about post spawners. That's a nice post spawn fish on that 8.0 Squarebill. Let me back us up right here, guys. That was right off that rocky spot. He hit that right at the boat too. That's wild. Back us up a little bit here. That was sick. We're getting a little bit close on that waypoint, so let me back us up. But okay, we're backed up. There we go, beautiful fish. That's a solid 2-pounder on that Magnum Squarebill. Also, I'm freaking talking about, guys. I love catching them offshore. No forward facing, just old school, graphing them up right on this drop. That fish cracked it right here at the boat. That's so cool. Oh man, that's fun. I feel like there's quite a few fish setting up down this stretch. Most likely, if that fish chased it that far out. There's still a lot of grass up here. I need to get my cast right. I probably can catch them on a few other baits too, other than this crankbait. This crankbait kind of helps me find them. But this waypoint here, what was that, 1094. That was a little hard spot, I remember. When we graphed it, I marked 2 little waypoints there, and that fish was right on that deal. That is awesome. So just burning that Squarebill back. I don't know if the Squarebill is going to be my best bait here, or if I need to switch over to a worm or something like that, but at least it helped us kind of find them. And that was so cool. Oh man. You can see it takes a bit of time to find these fish and figure out the right bait, the right everything, but it's worth the effort. This maybe isn't the best spot on the entire lake, but it's definitely at least has a few fish on it. You can see the process. That's the main thing, guys. I like to show you this process because I've had obviously days where I've come out here and found these groups that are a little bit, smaller fish or whatever, and then there's other times where you come out here and you catch 25 pounds on a spot like this. So I'm not really so concerned always about the size of the fish. It's just the process of how we're doing this. There's a little bit of grass up there. I'm going to switch to this weedless Wacky. I might throw, actually, I'll throw the big worm down there for a second. Throw the big worm because it seems like there's some grass mixed up in that rock. Probably because this lake was so low that some of that grass was growing actually on the shore. And then as this lake came up, because it's only like 3 foot up there, as this lake came up, a lot of that grass then got submerged. And these fish are probably setting up right on that break of that rock and that grass. And that crankbait is fine, but if it gets caught up in that grass, you just basically mess up your cast every time. So I'm gonna throw this worm instead, just to see if we can get a bite. Man, that's so fun though. Let's keep rolling through here. Might have to find another reaction bait. Maybe I can throw that fluke up there too. Get one of these fish to bite. Got to find a few more spots, obviously, if we're gonna light it up today, because I don't think that each of these spots has like 30 fish on it. I think each one might have, again, 10 to 15 fish, like I talked about at the very beginning of the video. It takes time for these fish to filter out, especially with this lake coming up. But I've had some crazy days doing this in like the last week of April, first week of May, just finding a group that no one else has found on a shallow point like this. Oh, this is so fun.
After catching my first fish on that Magnum Squarebill, I fished around the area with a variety of baits, including a Carolina rig, a big worm, and a fluke, but didn't get any bites. So I decided to head to a different creek to try to locate an area that was similar.
Okay, so the spot I actually planned on fishing had a bunch of guys fishing down the bank, and the spot that I wanted to graph wasn't that far off the bank, so I didn't want to get in everyone's way and cause an issue. So I came back down the lake, and there's actually one more spot I kind of thought that might be holding some fish. I did want to regraph this ledge real quick again, that we graphed earlier this morning, just to see if I had missed anything out here in terms of some fish, because we did mark one little fish that was out here, but my theory is that the fish should be getting out to this stuff at some point here in the next month. And so if they are going to be out here, and that is kind of the idea, then they should be potentially staged up or setting up shallower in that 8 to 15 foot zone where we found fish in the other area, but closer to the spawning areas, these spawning bays and stuff like that. And I do know that there are a few little rocky spots and things kind of just scattered out on this flat, and I'm just wondering if maybe these fish are pushed further up on this flat rather than way out here deeper on this drop. So I didn't get back in here earlier because there was, again, another boat that was just fishing the bank, but I didn't want to get too close to them. But I feel like if we kind of graph this middle ground and try to stick in that 15-ish foot zone, there's a pretty good chance we might be able to find some fish. Again, maybe not a massive group, but enough fish to get a few in the boat here. So let's work our way in. I mean, there were so many fish on that spot behind me there earlier this year that there have to be at least a few fish in this general zone that aren't just on the bank. There's a nice little rock pile or something there, man-made structure, but nothing that really jumps out at me. There is a little bit more rock kicking up here though, right in the depth zone I'm kind of thinking about. Look at that rock right there. That is some good looking rock. Right in that 10-foot zone. Hard to tell if there's fish in that rock right there, just because of how many rocks are down there. I'm also not seeing any shad in and around those rocks, which would give me an indication that we actually would have some fish in those rocks, but that doesn't mean that they can't be up here. Let's go. There's actually some grass and some kind of junk in the water from that lake being up. It looks like there's a little bit of just some type of weed in the water, grass, something. Not excited to see that. There are a couple fish though, from what it looks like, on the edge of that stuff, which is kind of interesting. Really interesting, actually. Let's make another pass through here. It's pretty shallow here, which is kind of nice. I like the fact that it's shallower. And maybe there's some rock and stuff out there. If we hit the right little stretch of it, maybe we find some fish. I don't want to get caught up in too much of that grass, because the grass is not good grass. If it was like hydrilla or something, I would try to actually fish the grass itself, but it doesn't look like that's the case. A lot of that grass is like the snot grass and stuff, which is not what we're looking for. I do see a couple fish right here. There's another fish right there. There's actually several fish right here. What in the world? Okay, there we go, guys. We just found a wad of them right there. That's a school right there. 15 feet of water. They're kind of hard to see, but there's a bunch of them schooled up right there. Oh my goodness, we found this is what I've been looking for. Who knew we were so close earlier in the day? Look at all those fish. These are all fish. All of those dots are fish, and we can see that clearly when we switch over to the down scan, side scan. I mean, that is a mega school right there. What in the world? Okay, we need to mark this. Guys, we are about to hammer them. And this is where it looks like you go from 0 to hero in a minute, because you find these groups and you're like, before that you're like, today's gonna suck, I need to go fish the bank, blah blah blah, and then you find this deal and all of a sudden it's just game on. Let me go back through here one more time. That school is just down that whole stretch. What in the world? It's like spread down that whole line right there. We saw that rock and stuff down there. There's just fish spread down that whole drop or that whole stretch. I don't know if we can crank it or what's going on. They're just spread down the bottom. Those are definitely bass though. More bass, more dots right there. I want to just roll down this one more time. It's deep enough where I feel like I can roll down it one more time, just to make sure I'm not crazy and those fish aren't just random fish are just swimming around out here. But it looked like there's a bunch of them right there too. Look at that on the left side of that side scan. Those are all bass from the looks of it. All that right in there, unless that's all just rock, but that looks like that's fish too. I mean, And yeah, there's still fish on the screen. They're just scattered through here. Wow. Interesting. I hope it's not just all in that snot grass. But what way is the wind blowing on me? The wind's kind of blowing in. I might just have to fan cast this. I don't know exactly the right approach to take with this right now. Bunch of fish stacked up right there too. They look smaller. This is crazy. Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff going on here. I don't know if I need to crank this, if I need to drag the Carolina rig. I'm not 100% sure. We're gonna see, I guess, based on what type of grass and stuff is down there. You might even go back to the fluke, because a crankbait would be my ideal scenario to catch these fish. But if the grass is too thick, obviously a crankbait's not gonna work. There's just fish scattered down this, so look at those fish right there. Are those bass? I don't know what those are. These could be just big gizzard shad too. Those are gizzard shad, I feel like. I think there's a mixture of stuff going on here, but this looks really good. Let's just stop and make a few casts, see what's going on. Got him. Here we go. Oh my gosh, figured out the bait finally. Maybe the timing. Literally first cast up here on the spot, guys. We had this spot marked. I knew there were some good ones down there and I could not get them to bite. Finally got the bait. Goodness, I was throwing a Carolina rig. I was throwing a crankbait, all this stuff. And there's a lot of this mossy grass down here and they just wouldn't eat it. But they'll eat that weedless wacky shot. Finally found that offshore school. We found it already, but I'm telling you guys, timing. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Finally got the right bait, got everything prepared. Now we're about to smash him. That's that core tackle weedless wacky shot. Comes through grass, comes through wood, everything extremely well. Beautiful fish, solid 2 3/4 pounder right there. There we go, guys. Beautiful fish getting back down there. Oh, there we go, guys. Got that fish on the core tackle weedless wacky shot. That's awesome. I'm gonna get another bait on here. I'd already caught like 3 or 4 on that bait. I just pulled it off the deck of my boat, and so that worm was all torn up. So let's get another one on here just so we have a fresh worm working. And you screw that Senko, this is a 5-inch MO Senko, onto that little spring which holds the bait extremely well. You have your weed guard here which helps it come through the grass, comes through wood really well, everything. And so all I'm doing here, guys, is throwing this wacky rig out at these waypoints that we marked a few hours ago. And again, fish through here. I probably didn't show it on camera, but I fished through here with a crankbait, Carolina rig, a big worm. I threw a few different other things, like a fluke, just a couple other things to see if I could get these fish to react, and none of it worked. And I thought, man, if I can't get them to buy a Carolina rig, then it's not even worth trying. And so I came back over here and I was thinking, man, this weedless wacky shot has been clutch for me this year on these offshore schools in the pre-spawn when they wouldn't bite. And I don't know why I didn't pick it up earlier here or on the first spot. And now it's making me want to go back to that first spot and throw this as well. And it also could just be the timing, because that was literally my first cast on the spot. And it could just be that these fish now, having kind of set up right, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's the right time for these fish to be feeding offshore. So we may be hitting that timing right as well as having the right bait, but we definitely found the fish. So hopefully we can get a few more bites here on this wacky shot. The way that I'm fishing it is basically just letting that bait sink down the bottom. It's actually pretty painful. It's an 1/8 ounce weight, but it takes a long time to get down there because it's just shimmying down to the bottom. And you just basically just work that thing down there as slow as you can, and that fish bit it while it was dead sticked. And I try to dead stick that bait down there on the bottom, and then just shake my rod tip up a few times, let the thing fall back down. It's, again, not the most exciting way to fish. That's why I kind of like cranking and doing other stuff, but sometimes you have to just do the boring thing to get him to bite. I can't remember exactly on that first cast, like if I casted more down these waypoints or if I'd casted, I have 2 waypoints here, this 1110 and I have 1109. I can't tell if I casted more at the 1109 or the 1110, so we're gonna have to kind of cast around and see what's working, but we at least have this figured out now. It could be a grind to get these fish to bite still. Like, it might be a bite every 20 or 30 minutes. It's not always going to be fast and furious on these post-spawn schools. I feel like there's a time though when you could pull up on the spot and catch them cranking or doing something different, but I'm gonna stick with this rig right now just because I just caught one. I'm not gonna put it down, and then see if we can get one more bite out here. Got him. There we go. Another good one here. Man, took another 15 minutes of firing this thing out there, but got another one. Pretty close to the last waypoint, just working down this group of fish. They're just kind of spread out here, but another nice one, guys. Golly. That weedless wacky shot is the way to get them, for sure. Get on up here, fish. Another nice post spawner. You can see that fish is all spawned out, pretty skinny, and he choked that weedless wacky shot right in the top of the mouth. This is a slow way to fish, a slow grind, but these are beautiful fish, super good ones. And these are the quality fish we've been looking for and the technique we've been looking for to get him to bite. I was dead sticking that thing, guys, on the bottom and just firing that out there. I was just throwing right at my next little wad of waypoints right in front of me here. Nothing fancy. I mean, I just got that thing all the way up there. It's probably just past where that waypoint 1107 is, kind of right in line almost with that 1106, but they're just kind of in this zone. We marked them on 2D, side scan, down scan, and that fish was just sitting down there. And I actually let that thing hit the bottom, and I was just waiting and waiting and waiting. And I was honestly waiting for it to hit the bottom. And then when I picked up, that fish was on there. And I sometimes do that. I just let that bait sink all the way down there and then just dead stick it. It's pretty boring. It's really slow. But this bait is able to work through that little snot grass that's down there, not get hung up at all, unlike the Carolina rig, the crankbait, other baits we're throwing. And I just feel like this is the best approach to get these fish to bite right now. It's not like I'm casting and winding. I'm literally just dead sticking a worm on the bottom. But when the fishing's tough, sometimes this is the way to do it. And I do think that probably on that first spot, I probably could have caught a couple more fish if I had just done this even earlier after I caught that first fish. I need to remember this from now on to pick up this wacky shot and just dead stick it down there, because it obviously is working. We are now on it with a pretty good consistency. That's 2 fish in a row. I feel pretty good that we're going to keep catching them here. And this is the power of finding these kind of post-spawn areas, because instead of having to run around and try to scrape together fish up shallow, fishing right behind all these other guys, I'm able to come out here and get some really nice fish in the boat. These are good post spawners. I mean, 3-pounders, and there's probably bigger fish even mixed in. I'm sure there's other ways to get some of these bigger fish to bite, especially if you had forward-facing sonar. I know I keep saying that, but if you have forward-facing sonar, I'm sure you could catch these fish even throwing a jighead minnow, a glide bait, other stuff. But without it, I don't know the best way right now to target these fish other than just throwing this wacky worm. The nice thing about the wacky worm is if these fish are suspended up, they'll follow that worm all the way down to the bottom and then trap it off the bottom. And if they're down there on the bottom, they'll obviously eat off the bottom as well. So this wacky worm can target the suspended fish, it can target the bottom fish all in one cast. It just takes a little bit of time, takes a little bit of patience, but once you kind of get in a good area like this, it's not that bad. Got him. Here we go. Working that thing out, actually swimming it. This is the 3rd fish that's hit it while I've been swimming it back, kind of. And the other 2 missed it. This one actually got it, thankfully. I don't know if I might set the hook into the Cinco itself. Finally got another fish here. Ooh, another good one too. This should be number 5 if I had landed them all. Golly, this is the bait though, guys. This is what they want. Nice fish. They're all just clones of each other too. All on that weedless wacky shot from Core Tackle. That is sweet. Right in the top of the mouth. Pinned them. Beautiful fish, solid. Again, nothing crazy, but just a nice 3-pounder, which, I mean, I'm gonna take any day of the week. That'd be a 4-pounder if it was full up for the summer, or close to it, probably 3.5-pounder, and all in that weedless Wacky shot. The thing about that weedless Wacky shot, guys, is that it has 1/8 of an ounce of lead on it, so it can sink down there, but at the same time, it has this nice weed guard, which allows it to come through any cover that you get into. So you can fish a Wacky rig deeper than you normally could and get it through cover, like, obviously, the snot grass we're fishing today, but also like actual good hydrilla. It works right through timber, brush piles, all kinds of stuff. So that's the deal, and that fish actually hit it while I was trying to swim it back. So potentially there's other baits we could figure out to catch them on here. Maybe ripping something out of that grass, as long as it doesn't get too bogged down in there. So we may want to try something else, but honestly, I mean, we're on it now. I feel like if we just kept grinding this out, we get 5 nice fish just like the one that we just caught. And that's kind of the goal when you get out here in this post-spawn period, when those fish are just setting up out offshore out here. Find a spot where you can catch multiple fish, you can catch some good quality fish, and it's not being pressured by other anglers. I mean, there have been probably 10 boats that have come into this pocket here and fished all the shoreline here. There's a little culvert in there that spits out some water. People have been fishing that. They've been fishing this riprap over here. I mean, boats have been circling this all day. No one's been casting right where I'm casting those. So I've had this all to myself, and there's a good reason for it, because it's not the easiest thing to find, and even when I did find it the first time, I didn't get him to bite. So I'm not saying that it's easy, but once you get the right bait, you have the patience to wait them out from a timing standpoint, it can go down. And this is by no means easy right now. I mean, it's a grind just sitting here casting at this same spot, but they're here, and I've, again, had 5 bites now, got 3 in the boat, so not too bad. I've only been fishing the spot for, I don't know, maybe 25 minutes, 30 minutes. So I'm getting a bite every 7-8 minutes, 6-7-8 minutes. That's really not bad at all. And this worm definitely is the deal. Got these fish to finally bite. Got him. There we go. Another one. This feels like actually a good one. I don't know if it is, but it feels better. It's not spinning around though, so you never know. I tried to actually fish through here with some moving baits, and literally my first cast back with the weedless Wacky, and I get bit. So they obviously want this bait. This is a good one. Don't know how good, but oh, I actually got him side swung. How did I side swing a fish with a Wacky rig? That is unbelievable. He must have just swiped at it. I felt him. Obviously I'm not using forward facing, but I got him on the outside with a Wacky rig. That's crazy. Look at that. You can see these fish are just swiping at the bait. I have never done that before in my life. That is the wildest thing. Nice little fish though. Solid 2.5-pounder again. Would be like a 3.5-pounder if it was healthy. That was really weird on that weedless Wacky. He must have just swiped at it and I set the hook. I don't know how. I honestly have no idea. Maybe I actually had another one on and there's so many down there that I set into that one. I have no idea. That's super, super weird, but either way, got him in the boat. Well, that was pretty wild, guys. I think that's the first time I've ever foul hooked a fish on a Wacky rig before, especially a weedless Wacky rig. And that just goes to show how sharp that trocar hook is in the weedless Wacky shot. It's a premium hook, and this rig is just getting it done today. It's actually pretty wild because I just got done fishing through this entire stretch again with a bunch of other baits. I was throwing a big jighead minnow, I was throwing tush with a spunk shad. I actually tried to throw a crankbait down there again, got all balled up in stuff. Threw the worm down there a little bit. The big 10-inch worm again was getting balled up in the grass. So it's kind of tricky to find a bait that comes through the grass here pretty well, so I'm a little bit limited, but I still felt like I could catch some fish on a big minnow, or, you know, working the crankbait like a jerk bait, stuff like that. But as soon as I picked this Wacky rig back up, literally I think it was first or second cast after picking it back up, I caught another fish. So this is obviously what these fish are wanting right now, and I'm not going to complain. Obviously I'm getting bites and getting quite a few fish in the boat, and so happy for sure. It just, again, it goes to show finding the right bait can be critical on these offshore areas, and the timing. I do think the timing was pretty important here, where these fish are now kind of getting ready to feed. It's now, you know, 3:30. We've been here for about an hour fishing this spot, and it's not like we're catching fish fast and furious, but we're catching enough. And if we were in a tournament situation and check-in was like at 3:30, we would have had a good opportunity to get some good fish in the boat, and we would have had the morning bite, which I didn't actually capitalize on. I wasn't out here to maybe put a kicker or two in the boat, and overall it feels like it was a pretty solid day with this technique for sure. Well guys, it was a grind, but we did manage to get 5 nice keeper bass in the boat offshore without forward-facing sonar. Pretty good in my book, especially in this post-spawn period, which is really tough, both shallow and offshore. The fish are in this transition mood, and so you're not always going to get the fish in the most aggressive state when you actually find them. That's why we had to finesse those fish today for the most part with that core tackle, 1/8 ounce weedless Wacky shot, and a 5-inch Yamamoto Senko. I was throwing this Wacky shot on a little bit longer rod just because I'm fishing deeper and wanting to make long casts. This is a Denali Lithium Pro 7'4" medium heavy power moderate action spinning rod. By far my favorite spinning rod in the world. It's a little bit longer, bigger, it doesn't feel so wimpy, and it is a great offshore spinning rod. You can actually pick up this rod in any Denali products at denalifishing.com, and you can use my discount code down in the description to get 30% off all Denali fishing products. So definitely use that. Again, link down in the description to all these rods plus that discount code. I was throwing that with just some 15-pound braided line main line to an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader and just this Shimano Nexave reel. Honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of this reel because these knobs keep coming off on me, but I picked it up for 50 bucks at Academy earlier this year because all my other spinning rods were falling apart on me. So anyways, not the best reel in the world, but not the worst reel, so it gets the job done. And then as far as my other bait that I caught a nice fish on, I was just throwing this Strike King KVD 8.0. This is my favorite crankbait in the post-spawn time of the year. This crankbait's been absolutely demolished and torn up. You can see that bill is completely destroyed, and I've caught a lot of big fish on this bait. It is a pretty beefy bait, so it doesn't work that great if you don't have big forage in your lake, but if you do, a lot of times it can get the job done. It dives about 5 to 8 feet deep. I also upgrade the stock treble hooks on this crankbait just because the ones that it comes with aren't always the best. This is just a size 1 Gamakatsu round bend. And then I'm throwing that with, again, kind of a specialized rod just because this is a bigger square bill, but you want a rod with some bend so they don't throw that bait. This is a Denali Lithium Pro Magnum crankbait rod, 7'10", extra heavy, moderate action. That moderate action is what allows that rod to bend so that the fish don't throw the hooks as easy, but it's a stout enough rod to throw this pretty big square bill. And then as far as my line, I'm just pairing that up with 20-pound fluorocarbon for my line, and then a Abu Garcia Max Z reel. It's just one, again, picked up at Walmart a long time ago. It's a 7-to-1 gear ratio reel though. That's my favorite gear ratio with this bigger Magnum square bill. When I am throwing a deeper diving crankbait like this Blitz Magnum EXDR, I will go to a 5-to-1 gear ratio reel just because it helps reduce some of the wear and tear on your hands and forearms when you're cranking it in. It has a little more torque, but it doesn't help all that much because my hands were still cramping when I threw it today. But either way, 7-to-1 isn't too bad. This 8.0 doesn't pull that hard, but it's just a great bait. So those are the baits I was throwing today, and kind of a great 1-2 punch on lakes that have gizzard shad in them in this post-spawn. The lake I'm on, again, is a little bit ahead of probably the other lakes in this area, or maybe lakes in your area, but within the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, you're gonna be able to find schools of fish just like the one that I found here, and you're gonna have to search around your lake. I actually graphed around a bunch of different areas on this lake and only found fish on this one spot really grouped up, and then we had that one other spot that had a few fish on it, but not that many. And so you have to spend some time graphing around, looking around like I showed in the beginning of this video, but it's definitely worth it. You can put a lot of fish in the boat quickly if you follow this process. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. We'll see you on the next one.